Il titolo in inglese della mia presentazione è wait a second, I'm in the title. Wetware, Network Systems, Thermodynamics and Computational Medium of Water. So, quello che volevo, posso parlare in italiano così più semplicemente?
Sì, sì.
L'idea del wetware era prima suggested da Richard Feynman, ma quando Feynman ha parlato del wetware durante gli anni 60, 50 infatti, era prima, dopo la guerra, la seconda guerra mondiale, lui ha pensato in un modo più associativo, astratto, meno particolarizzato attraverso la tecnologia di questa epoca, degli anni 50, che la cibernetica era anche era unita con computational science, vero? Vuol dire la distinzione fra la cibernetica e la computer science non era ancora fondato sulla computational theory e la matematica del giorno. Ma lui aveva un pensiero che era influenzato da Schrödinger, un altro fisico importante, nel suo piccolo libro What is Life, che lì parla sull'entropia e biologia allo stesso tempo. E infatti attraverso questa applicazione arriva al concetto del negentropi. Negentropi vuol dire un aspetto dinamico del sistema che va contro diciamo la tendenza principale according il secondo legge di termodinamica, che vuol dire che tutto sarà in equilibrio a un certo punto, perché un sistema non usa il supporto infinitamente e a un certo punto si calma, si resta, si sta in resta. E in questo modo lui aveva la possibilità di spiegare anche il fonte della vita, l'origine della vita, l'emergenza della vita e anche la maniera in cui informazione e memoria alla Bergson, in questo senso, possiamo essere conservati dall'organismo e anche essere passati al futuro attraverso ontogenic e filogenic capacità. In questo senso Schrödinger e Feynman avevano la visione del scope, la visione del progetto. Oggi comunque ovviamente abbiamo biocomputation, nanotechnology, specialmente in medicina l'usano molto, inserire codify and code liquidi o acqua nel senso più generale, più astratto, con l'informazione. Ma l'idea pura comincia con il concetto di non avere un corpo delineato, finito, oggettivo, ma invece avere un tipo di oggettività che sempre sta in movimento, come l'acqua. E questo risulta in tre aspetti che volevo parlare oggi, su quello che volevo spiegare di più. Il primo è l'aspetto del rapporto, come dicevo prima, fra sistemi termodinamici chiusi e aperti, in cui il sistema chiusi finendono all'entropia, un tipo di mancanza di informazione, che non creano più informazione, the information that makes the information, in Bateson sense. I sistemi aperti sono qualche volta, più di qualche volta, più di sì, più di no, sono aperti e i cambiamenti sono caotici. Networks hanno altre regole che non sono sistema nel senso fisico, termodinamico, ma più nel senso dell'epistemologia o il concetto epistemologico che noi abbiamo dell'informazione. Information theory, neural networks, and so on and forth. L'idea che mi è venuta quando pensavo di questo era l'applicazione che ha fatto, e se posso far vedere un attimo.
Sì, sì, vai.
Come faccio?
C'è scritto condividi, share.
Ah, sì.
Share, poi fai...
No, but go to security and privacy.
No, dovresti cliccare su schermo intero, whole screen, entire screen, non so come.
Sì, lo so. Non lo so.
No, non... vuoi... Vabbè, tu continua, vuoi mandarmelo per email? Provo a...
Ho mandato l'email, mando un altro.
No, dico, hai mandato queste immagini?
Sì.
Ah, ce le ho già io?
Intende le immagini che sono nel Word, quelle disegnate a mano di Da Vinci? No.
Sì.
Ah, intende quelle? Sì, allora sono nel Word.
Sono nell'abstract, giusto?
Nell'abstract, sì, volevo dire.
Ce n'è una sola, no? Ce n'è una sola di
Sono
immagine.
dei disegni a matita di Leonardo.
Sì.
Se fa fatica glieli condivido io.
Sì, vuoi provare tu, Paolo?
Se volete provo, sì, però mi devi abilitare la condivisione.
Sì, aspetta.
Aspetta che provo a fare copia immagini. Faccio un po'.
Ecco, adesso dovresti...
Sì, arrivo. Dammi un secondo. Vuota, ok, faccio presentazione, benissimo. Ok, condivido, datemi un attimo, eccolo qua. Finestra, provate questa, ditemi se la vedete.
Sì, eccolo, perfetto.
Adam, è
Dai.
corretto questo? Era questo che volevi?
Sì.
Figurati.
Questo, per esempio, questo disegno è molto evocativo, ma anche in un modo più reale, empirico, segua la linea della formazione di un sistema. Vuol dire che ogni ostacolo nel naviglio crea un sistema, un subsystem. E questi vortici, invece di essere vortici che hanno la relazione fra causa ed effetto, sono casi effettuali che cambiano il sistema stesso. è un tipo di chaos theory, la teoria di caos, più di 1000 anni fa. Nel senso che se guarda e segui, possiamo vedere gli altri, per favore?
Ma Adam, io ho solo questo, non ne ho altri.
Va bene, va bene.
Sì,
Allora,
sì, ce n'è uno solo.
Te la rimetto se vuoi. Perché ho solo questa immagine, nel tuo abstract c'era solo questa.
ok.
Ci vedi? La vedete o è uscita?
È uscita, ma ce la
Ok, te la
ricordiamo.
rimetto.
Altri esempi che lui ha fatto un disegno che mi sembra tipo di neural network della carta, della cartografia di Naviglio, del sistema.
Ecco, comunque non ce l'abbiamo.
Sì, va bene, allora lasciamo perdere. Uso un nuovo laptop e non conosco ancora come fare qualche cosa perché c'è un firewall che non lo so, non ho capito come funziona.
Ma semmai mettiamo le immagini nel blog.
Sì, c'è un chat here?
Sì, sì, no, dopo dico, quando uno guarda il video, poi può
C'è un
vedere
chat.
le immagini.
Io,
Adesso
io ho
sì.
trovato un'immagine, provo a vedere se è mica questa.
Sì, esatto, grazie.
Ah,
Ok, l'ho
perfetto.
cercata su internet in tempo reale, ho provato.
Sì, anche io facevo lo stesso. Si vede
Perfetto.
che quello che faceva Leonardo con il suo intuizione, ma anche con il concetto del rapporto dinamico fra sistema, systems and network. And ci sono 3 livelli di configurazione. C'è il livello generale, come se vediamo qui all'aerial view, una veduta dall'alto, e una veduta dall'angolo che si vede un altro immagine, e poi a livello più microscopico che lui rende le onde, the waves, the water waves, come sono capelli, no? Come ha dipinto nei quadri, capelli oppure un tipo di brioche, una cosa che si vede che è twisted and twirled, like the double helix. So, io penso che Leonardo aveva la genomorfologia giusta, che l'informazione di life, what is life, è infatti encoded in liquid, in water, not in the material substance of crystals per se or material substances. E la ragione per questo è che c'è un alto livello di spiegazione fra systems that are either aperte o chiuse e il network. All'origine, the network has to have both open and closed systems. It necessitates it because that's the kind of the energy where the energy of the information comes from. And so as a segue, I thought about another implication of that problem, cambio all'inglese perché è più difficile parlare sulla meccanica quantistica in italiano per me. Comunque l'idea è così. La termodinamica classica designates entropy as an inevitable predicament of any system. Quantum physics, quantum mechanics, in a foundational sense, has no reliance on time symmetry, la simmetria del tempo. Non c'è bisogno fare l'argomento che c'è una direzione del tempo, che c'è una riversibilità, eccetera, eccetera. Ci sono scientists tipo Prigogine, Varela e altri che hanno fatto un grande argomento su questa cosa, che hanno detto che l'idea oppure la metafisica della scienza moderna e contemporanea, come la classica, come Newton, ancora basata sulla nozione della simmetria ed anisotropic relations. In other words, può muovere indietro in tempo e avanti in tempo allo stesso, effettivamente in simile condizione. Now, we can't imagine that because we can't reverse life. We can't unfry the egg, so to speak, back to the shell. But what is interesting, and that much I want to point out, that despite the fact that quantum physics relies on a kind of a symmetrical idea of time, quantum computation, as in quantum computers, in order to accelerate and maximize the capacity of computation, needs to be cooled down. And how they're cooled down? They're cooled down by water, by freezing temperature. So the notion of negative entropy is facilitated or enabled by the use of water or water-like liquid. So that's basically my main idea generale, that water as a medium is actually much more capable in offering us ways to look between closed machinic systems, open systems, and networks in a dynamical way that maps the territories of the system within the network, not as in a dichotomic or binary way, but as a generative way that corresponds to a lot of the dynamic principles of chaos theory or theory of complexity. But now not just in computation, but also in the intervention with life and the living. So that's it.
Bene, mi pare molto chiaro e questa immagine fra l'altro è bellissima. E cominciamo la discussione. Paolo, vuoi aspettare?
Sì, posso chiudere intanto l'immagine, così ci
Sì,
vediamo.
sì,
Cosa dite? Se non
sì,
mi serve
sì,
qua. Sì, aspetta, com'è che si fa? Interrompi condivisione. Ok. Sì,
sì.
lascerei il posto agli altri.
Alessandro, il coraggioso.
Sì. Sì, in effetti ci vuole coraggio. Mi sembra estremamente complesso, chiaro e complesso allo stesso tempo. Ci sono varie cose che mi vengono in mente e le butto un po' lì, così un po' alla rinfusa, vediamo dove si arriva. Un primo punto che mi è venuto in mente sono delle analogie tra l'acqua e due altri sistemi di distribuzione della materia come sistema complesso. Uno che ho avuto l'occasione di ammirare, proprio descritto sempre visivamente da Leonardo nei suoi ultimi disegni, e sono i disegni delle tempeste. Leonardo, prima di morire, era ossessionato dalle tempeste e ne ha fatto dei disegni straordinari che, se prendiamo come opere d'arte, sono tra le prime senza figure umane, in un certo qual modo. Le ho viste alla Queen's Gallery a Londra qualche anno fa. Quindi interessante pensare che anche da questo punto di vista, come sappiamo, il meteo, il tempo è un sistema complesso, per definizione, e quindi anche qui abbiamo un'altra intuizione di Leonardo molto diretta di un sistema complesso. E ricorda un pochino questi ripples, no? Questi piccoli vortici che vediamo nell'acqua di questa immagine proposta da Adam, anche i vortici dell'aria nei disegni di Leonardo delle tempeste ricordano un po' questi. Insomma, c'è un'analogia tra complessità e vortice, forse da esplorare in un certo qual modo. Un'altra cosa che mi veniva in mente è dunque è il passaggio che c'è dall'organico all'inorganico, che in effetti è molto presente in What is Life, e la domanda appunto su come si passa da un livello all'altro, no? E in un certo qual modo, quindi queste sono, come dire, sono delle realtà. L'acqua è di fatto in effetti un punto di sintesi, come anche l'aria, forse gli elementi in generale potremmo quasi dire, sono dei punti di unione, di congiunzione tra l'organico e l'inorganico in un certo qual modo, perché abbiamo dei fenomeni che implicano una presenza di materia organica, però all'interno di un contesto in cui possono anche esserci degli elementi inorganici che vengono a interagire. E in fondo questo passaggio ontologico è la grande domanda che si pone Schrödinger, ecco, forse può essere interessante esplorare questa cosa anche proprio dal punto di vista ontologico, no? Cioè che cosa succede, qual è il passaggio, c'è un vero passaggio, quanto questo passaggio è netto e quanto anche, come sottolineava lo stesso Adam, era la questione dell'entropia, no? Quanto gioca in questo passaggio. E poi la cosa che mi veniva in mente era che Schrödinger in What is Life si interroga anche nei termini di una nozione a me cara, che è quella della coscienza quantistica, cioè un punto di connessione che può essere anche interessante da esplorare è quello come dire, dell'inorganico che si annida nell'organico anche dal punto di vista della coscienza, da un punto di vista quantistico, quindi l'idea che la coscienza possa essere un campo quantistico con un suo comportamento e che possa essere anche quello un anello di congiunzione, diciamo, tra organico e inorganico, quindi così da aggiungere magari all'acqua e alle tempeste, così come non lo so, sto un po' viaggiando con la mente per adesso liberamente. L'altro riferimento che mi veniva in mente, dicevo, da un lato le tempeste, dall'altro le ife, i funghi. Cioè, per esempio, l'uso che viene fatto viene in mente per i water systems, il disegno dei navigli e le reti neurali, un uso spesso che viene fatto delle ife, leggevo in un libro, è nel vedere come si distribuiscono all'interno di uno spazio con degli ostacoli, e vengono usate le strategie di distribuzione e di riproduzione delle ife per poi modellare il traffico nelle grandi città. Nel senso che il loro modo di distribuirsi e di connettersi e di comunicare è così efficace che viene usato come modello organico per gestire appunto una situazione anche questa di ibridazione tra organico e inorganico, cioè le auto guidate da noi, ben presto anche dall'intelligenza artificiale, all'interno degli spazi urbani. E quindi è un sistema complesso a tutti gli effetti, che modellizza, di tipo organico, che modellizza però una condizione di distribuzione dell'informazione e anche dell'azione sociale. Ecco, non so dove andare con queste cose in realtà. Diciamo che sarebbe interessante vedere se riusciamo magari in quest'ora a trarre delle conclusioni provvisorie, ovviamente, da questo input molto molto accattivante e prezioso, secondo me. Ecco, per adesso mi fermo qui.
Grazie. Sì, le tempeste di Leonardo sono infatti visione di entropia. E infatti hai ragione, perché lui aveva un'ossessione con la possibilità di rappresentare quello che è immateriale, non quello che già esiste come un materiale, ma anche lo spirito, l'anima. Ha fatto anche disegni per spiegare la coscienza o la nostra coscienza in un modo visibile, invece di astratto. E poi quello che volevo dirti al rispetto dal secondo punto che hai fatto, che secondo me quello che collega tutti questi isole di interesse che avevo è una topologia, una geometria più astratta ma più precisa, che può subvert a local system into the global network or neural network and a macro network into a small system. E questo paradossalmente, e questa è l'idea del quantum physics, che è più fondamentale che la termodinamica, invece di essere controllata dai principi quantistici della fisica, è controllata a livello classico della termodinamica e dell'entropia. Ci sono queste contraddizioni che poi basta così. Sì. Ti ringrazio, molto interessante quello che
Ma sono chiose su quello che dici tu, ma in effetti sì, questa contraddizione è anche molto interessante, questa dell'acqua come modello appunto per l'inorganico, però anche strumento per raffreddare i computer quantistici di cui parli anche nell'abstract. Anche questo in effetti mette in luce anche proprio a livello fisico, chimico, la contraddizione in corso di cui parli.
Sì, perché possiamo immaginare un momento al futuro che la distinzione stessa tra organico e inorganico non appare più, è sparita, perché l'organismo sarà così dipendente sulla Umwelt, lo spazio generale che è già fabbricato, è già fatto, è già preparato, che la causa natura sarà diminished to a filmish, the way we look today at this kind of what is inorganic. Of course, we know with microplastics that there are also organisms on that level too.
Scusate, più che contraddizione sembrerebbe questa classica dicotomia fra meccanicismo e vitalismo. Siamo sempre lì che cerchiamo una terza via, che già Bergson aveva messo in evidenza, e per cui se si rischia o di dare troppa vitalità, per esempio, ai vortici e all'acqua, o troppa meccanicità a quello che non è, a quello che è organico. Quindi una forma, nel secondo caso abbiamo un riduzionismo, nel primo caso abbiamo un vitalismo che si basa su forze che non sappiamo, che possiamo solo nominare, perché forza non vuol dire niente. già da Leibniz se veniva nominata come force vive, ma non sappiamo. Quindi posso fare questa piccola obiezione, sono assolutamente d'accordo, però una possibile obiezione potrebbe essere questo, sostituire il network alla cosa o al sistema isolato, che in effetti, come dicevi tu, è un ideale, non esistono sistemi chiusi, comportamenti chiusi o sistemi soltanto aperti, eccetera. Questa enfasi sul vortice, quindi su una forza, su un'energia, no? La chiamiamo energia, non rischia poi di non spiegare più la materia come forma di omeostasi? Cioè non si rischia la relazionalità pura. Abbiamo fatto un altro di questi seminari con Riccardo Manzotti, che è tutta dall'altro versante, cioè la relazionalità pura diventa qualcosa che svuota senza poi dire più niente su niente. È una provocazione. Tu come risponderesti? Cioè vortice, movimento, energia, informazione potrebbero sostituire questa specie di destinazione che chiamiamo materia.
Sì, posso spiegare questo in due modi, uno più, diciamo, libero, simbolico, attraverso Leonardo. Io direi che Leonardo sapeva che la morte di un sistema non è una morte di un organismo, non è la stessa cosa, ma invece di ridurre quello che viva a livello inorganico, lui ha deciso di rappresentare l'organico come l'inorganico. Allora, the bottom up, top bottom, bottom up. Che bottom up è proprio la maniera di Leonardo, e per questo è lui un genio, nel senso che è l'unico nella storia della scienza che ha pensato fuori dai confini della scienza e la razionalità, come dicevi te.
Beh, perché l'ha cominciata lui.
Sì, non solo ha cominciato, ma è rimasto isolato in questa posizione, che non cada allo incubo della scienza,
La scienza.
che non si sa quando parli razionalmente e quando parli empiricamente. Invece lui era neutrale in questo rispetto. Questa è una risposta più simbolica attraverso Leonardo, che mi ispira di pensare su queste cose. L'altra questione che emerge è quella non tra vitalismo, riduzionismo, eccetera, eccetera, ma è più la questione di se noi possiamo fare un tentativo di spiegare la natura fuori dalla natura. In other words, the system or the network are conceptually distinct, perché a network emphasizes relazioni, rapporti. A system, mechanism, regulatory mechanism. E alla fine di questa strada mentale è la questione che la domanda è fra informazione e energia. Quando l'informazione diventa trasforma ad un livello di energia e quando l'energia traduce se stesso come una forma di informazione. Con quanto allora, il problema del Bergson che lui ha fatto un argomento epistemologico che era necessario per mantenere the way of thinking ontologicamente sul concetto della vita, del life. And vital is a way of making it such, but it's not necessary. I don't think that the whole vitalist argument has to be brought. I think it's really a question between energy and information, and when is information just energy, and when energy becomes information. Because you can have a fire outdoor, like in California. We have fires that ravages like houses and fields, but the same fire is a source of energy and can be used constructively as information. So, I don't know, spero che...
Sì, no, è chiaro. Può essere un modo da sviluppare, una cosa da sviluppare.
Sì.
Bene, Bruno. Hai un commento, una domanda? Se vuoi anche in English, if you prefer.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, Brunella, and congratulations, Adam. It's a very interesting view you shared with us of this network as this flow. I would like to ask you also to share with us, with the colleagues who will be watching this video later, a bit of your history, of your trajectory. How did you come up with this view? And also, following this view about Leonardo, about flow, what's the future on your perception?
I'll start from the end. So we walk backwards to infancy. I think that the future is going to be very much like the past. Cycles of destructions and cycles of rebirth. I think that's how Leonardo saw it. When I read like his alchemical writings in Italian for the first time, it totally blew my mind. I was like 21 or 22. Because what he says there, he says like semi-sarcastically. He says, he asks questions, why when a lion devours an animal, a rabbit, we don't call him a killer? But when a man kills a rabbit, he's a killer. So I think it basically sums up the whole notion of ethics and philosophy, and what we know and we don't know, or we don't understand. So I think that there are many more cycles in human history than we care to remember. But I think that the other question that you asked, the bigger one, was, remind me? Oh,
Yeah.
The boring stuff, how I came to. Well, as I told you, I started as an art student. Then I became interested in architecture, and then I became interested in philosophy. And I ended up doing a PhD in philosophy of science. And I moved through different countries and continents throughout my life. I think I'm at the last stop of my l'ultima fermata. qui a Los Angeles. We have a governor, a Republican governor that is running on the idea of let's make California great again. And he's going to lose because of that, because no one wants to make it greater than what it is now. You know, how can you improve something that is already very good? And here I ended up teaching for like 25 years in art schools like Cal Arts and Otis College and Cal State Los Angeles. I taught like philosophy and critical theory and science classes and stuff like that. And the one thing about my biography that is important is that I know Brunella before I know most of my friends in adulthood. I know Brunella from 91, I think, when so came to
Toronto.
Yes, a previous life. And,
This is life and chance.
yeah.
So going back to the future, if there is no future and we live in cycles, doesn't this remind of a closed system?
No, because it's like a pinball game. You don't know which exit you're going to exit this time. The combinatorics are infinite because the system keeps moving, keeps shifting. So it's not a piece of cyclicism like Giambattista Vico or like later Hegel or Sprengler that have like a more kind of storytelling cycles. Here the cycle writes itself. In itself, the problem that we will have in the future is that we will have no time left to measure time, temporality. You know? It's like a little bit someone that's going so fast that this person cannot measure their height. Because just by the moment they move the hand, they grow another inch or like a millimeter. So we are chasing our own tail in trying to tell a story for an unfolding of a effortless future and recycled past. But you see, that's the problem of history today. There is an importance to the historical object, not just to the historical activity of historicizing, of narrating. But now we live in this crazy moment that everyone thinks they have the better narrative and they have to tell it to everybody else. What's the right narrative? Invece, quello che dobbiamo ottenere è sempre l'oggetto storico. Non è solamente come una forma di evidenza, ma anche per diventare vivo, nel senso storico. La storia è, come Beniamin diceva, è per il presente, esiste per il presente, non è per il passato che è passato.
Non c'è un Nachleben che viene dopo, cioè il presente viene prima del passato.
Sì, è così.
Sì.
Finiamo con l'infanzia.
Sì. Bene, un'ultima domanda di... Oh, scusate. No, mi sentite. Di Paolo, che so che sarà lunga e complessa.
No, maybe better in English. What do you prefer?
Come preferisci. Mi dispiace perché in questi giorni parlo soltanto in inglese. È diventato molto monolitico, nel senso...
No, on the contrary, thank you for the efforts that you make, because I know how difficult is it to try to express some shades in not your own idiom, because a lot of concepts become completely destructurated because the syntax of the language are different. So like the distinction between the medium and the message is always a very very problematic. That I could say many things also on the feedbacks that have been done after your provocation, but okay, I could just say that water, the fact that you talked to water, of course, as a sort of linking element between, for instance, the inorganic and the, let's say that they are not clear-cut dividable, but okay, between the inorganic and the biological realm, of course, is not by chance, because I've been spending on the last maybe 20 years of my life on studying water in the framework of quantum field theory, and emerge the reasons why it is the element of life emerges very clearly. And the reason is not, of course, just molecularity, but is the capacity of giving rise to collective dynamics that are typically featured by coherence, the ability of make in-phase oscillations and cycles and compartmentalization. I could say that one of the fallacy of the thermodynamics to describe the living systems is because they are not describable as matter bulk system, homogeneous isotropical system, but because they are full of sub-components, subsystems, niches, compartmentalization, etc. So you cannot use macroscopic state function to describe a volume of living matter. You cannot describe like a piece of copper or exactly also volume of water. But anyway, I actually exactly I agree with that, with Brunella when she said that we are constantly in the danger of oversimplify the things between an excessive vitalism applied to machines, inorganic realm, algorithms, whatever, and maybe on the other side, in the danger of being too mechanistically to describe too mechanistically the living system. That actually, I agree with Adam when he says that the living system is a history. Life is built on the history, on the story. For me, this is one of the points that on which, for instance, now the Catholics thinks that life exists a priori as life and has a value in itself, and I agree on this in the sense that, of course, life is a value, but it's very different to eat an almond or to cut an almond tree, because there is a whole history of which the organism is enriched. So a full relationality, I think that a relationship is exactly the essence of the living system, maybe in a more radical conception than the constructivist like Varela, Maturana, whatever. And I don't think, unlike Mazzotti, that conceiving the relationship as an ontological element, we risk to fall down in an inconsistency or a sort of nihilism. Maybe there is a nihilism of the description, but not a nihilism of what reality is, because I challenge anyone to try to tell me where an object begins and where an object ends. And I think that this, I like the idea of substitute entities with networks, because actually any conception, any classical conception of a finite isolable object is just an artifact. So could be interesting to try to think to the networks instead of the entities to reason in the complexity, in the complex systems and whatever. Of course, I hope that this kind of reflections and this kind of speculations in the philosophical sense, not in commercial sense of the word speculation, do not become tools for the dystopic, transhumanist, digital-like culture that aim toward a terrible singularity between life and machine. This is my hope. But I stop here because there would be many things that should be tackled very precisely. But of course, this is my appeal, not to fall to this exactly too much vitalism in the inorganic and in the machine, and too much mechanicism in the living system.
But there's no risk that we become transhumanist. Don't worry.
I'm saying
Anyway. For the wide audience that we have. Good. Either Ada, you want to say something conclusive, and then of course, as usual, we can have comments, or we can wrap everything up at the end of the series, finding out a few points.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank you all for your thoughts and comments, and to segue to Paolo and say that I think to some extent, if you know the divisions within science today between physicists like in the even Richard Feynman's sort of school of thought, or Schrödinger, and people like Wolfram, Stephen Wolfram, and his whole notion of universal language and transcoding. It seems that science itself has a dilemma with like demonstrative as opposed to methodologically kind of developed, formulated with equation and so on, scientific explanation. And unfortunately, the demonstrative is much more powerful than the deductive reasoning. In other words, they want to get results now. And if it takes like a computer to do it for you, you do it. You don't ask questions. Even though the computer is built by humans and so on, or at some point even by non-humans, but in itself, it's not an agency that has culpability, responsibility, empathy in a kind of true sense, even without getting to vitalism. So I think what I would say to you, what you were like suggesting, I would warn ourselves that in the war with AI, AGI, we're not fighting war between brains. We're fighting the war of our bodies. In that sense, it comes close to a radicalization of Giorgio Agamben's notion of the bare body, or the bio, in a much more totalistic sense, because what will happen is that our bodies, our brains are already overwhelmed by AI. It already happened. That happened yesterday. But right now, if the physicality of the body of life is going to be negated, and it's already being negated by wars that are conducted with drones, like a video game, and with an absolute lack of empathy on both sides to the victims that are often unrelated to the conflict. So it's already, this theater is already happening to us. We're fighting for our bodies. It's like first generation feminism fighting for the bodies of, the right to vote, the right to own your body. And even in the US, things are not that clear. They seem to be very ambiguous right now. So I'm sharing the hope, but I can't say that I'm sharing the optimism that we'll be able to overcome the body issue.
But how would you define physicality and body within this idea that they are networks?
Well, I think that's where I find my hope, that if we can somehow find strategies of dismantling systems, maybe we'll be able to de-hierarchize and horizontalize the world. I like that in French it's mondialization, not globalization, because it's worldization. We can find worldization by deflating each system and pop it up like into the ocean of networks. So I think this is one way to think about another metaphor from quantum physics. Instead of thinking about the right and the left spin of a particle, you're thinking about up and down relations. They're more hierarchical. So the ones who have and the ones who have not are divided an up and down relation in relation to the spinning left and right. So that's a hope, because the networks are much more powerful than any kind of agency, including AI, any specific AI. That's what amazed me about Leonardo, that the tempest, as Alessandro was mentioning, you can fool yourself that you can do a water jet cutting much more precise than laser, when you do water jet cut materials. You can split an air. But at the same time, when there is a tsunami, it's overwhelmingly uncontrollable.
And unpredictable also, by some extent.
Exactly. What's the moment? We don't know. We can't understand it. So I think with Leonardo's intuition, with destruction comes a hope for a new building. That's the only thing we can say. So with the destruction of the conventional bodies that we were accustomed to from the Enlightenment, and as Foucault cared to deconstruct them and others, now we're at the point that there is an emergence of a new body. We don't have a name for it, but I think if we approach it from a network perspective, or engagé, as opposed to a system, we will kind of demolecularize the issue at stake and look at everything as worldly connected, not globally, but worldly connected.
In this sense, science is part of the network. It's not that it is just the opposite of. When Leonardo invents something, he invents something, that is, he uses this ability to add something to nature that didn't exist before. So what I mean is, it's not that science is the opposite of systems theory or what we are calling cybernetics, etc. But it cannot replace. It cannot go beyond its range of application. This is what science has become since early modernity until now. So the problem with science and technology, and maybe Bruno knows much better, is the fact that it has become an epistemological model. This is the problem. We have to get rid of that.
Yeah, scientism.
Scientism. Yeah, when Bruno makes spaceships, he makes something. Okay, so there's an enormous investment on the conclusion of an invention. So the conclusion is something that is added to nature. And therefore, this is what science does. We cannot simply say it is wrong, okay, or there is nothing to do. We're all inside this embrace of science. Bruno, what do you think? What was the relationship between the spaceship and the network that you're studying concerning the governance?
I think what is the merge of novelty, if I may call it novelty, is how we are missing this network view. That's why when I was reading the abstract for our talk today, especially being Milan for this vision period as a researcher here, so I said, oh, what a different view about Navili. And I think we are missing a lot of this living view about governance and about the connections, why something is happening. So that's in the same approach that I'm following regarding view at governance as a flow, understanding what is flowing and why, or come the vortice, né? Que parliamo qui. So this is what I'm doing, and I think we are missing a lot. So we are surrounded by this mechanistic view about reality. So it's very welcomed, this kind of discussion and thought into other areas of thought. So that's my small contribution that I'm trying to bring.
You know, Bruno, in the US, you have Elon Musk developing his spaceships, and he's creating drought in areas like Arizona, Texas, and so on, because the industries that do all from cryptocurrency to quantum computation to computers in general and to spacecraft are using enormous amount of water that used to be applied for irrigation. So we're creating a global crisis, a world crisis, in terms of the misuse of water for supporting these new technologies. And it's almost like a sacrificial price that we're willing to pay as societies right now in order to have the notion of advancement or advance perpetuated and retained. So we also have to think about what more radically and with a lot of courage about the notion of advancement. You know, it's not an accident that Leonardo was a Rinascimento, una persona del Rinascimento, because the Rinascimento vuol dire it's not just advancement for the advancement's sake. It's the calculation, the calculus of history, what it teaches us about things. And in that sense, if he would be born today, maybe no one would pay attention to him. It's possible. But he was resourceful precisely because he had this unbiased view of the future as better and more advanced and more sophisticated and so on and forth. So, you know, in many ways, there is an entropy. Think about the notion of craft, artigianale, something artigianale. Craft, to write a poem, not to let, Alessandro in a sense knows that, not to let the computer generate the poem for you. You know, it's like the closest thing I think about it is like cybersex, which is basically you give someone else the trouble to have sex and you just want to get the orgasm. You know, so
it's not fun either with the poem or with the sex.
Yeah, exactly.
But
So
you
that,
can use, the difference is that you can use the machine to write a poem if you direct it towards your own aim, whereas cybersex is just cybersex. It is not a work of art. Work of art can use everything. It can also use the machine if needed, but it has to be part of the process, not the aim.
yes,
Just part of a possible process that you decide to do one day, and the other day you put aside the machine and you don't use the machine. You see what I mean? It's like we have to think that way, I think.
that's the craft.
Yes, it's still the craft, indeed. Yes, I agree.
And
Yes, but
if we lose the crafts or sources of crafts, we cannot amend it or establish a rapport with it. We're always extrinsic to it as a tool or object.
But advanced technologies are not crafts. So if you need to build a spacecraft, a spaceship, you need water or not. How can you not use water? We are inside of these technologies. We cannot simply say, we simply destroy them. No, we're not Luddites.
Of course.
If I could
Bruno,
say,
how can you make these technologies for the space without using water?
no, sorry, if I can say, the problem is not. It's not. In this question, we are given for granted that we have to do that. The matter is exactly, but are we? Is something that is fruitful really to do something like this? In the sense that we have to meta-observe each time our gesture and consider this gesture in a contextualization that, of course, must be referred to the intelligence of life. So the problem is not how can I construct the atomic bomb, but should I construct it? Just to make a stupid example, but it could be valid for many other things. For many other things that today in the proto-transhumanist trend we are facing every day. For instance, do we want more faster connections in internet? Maybe. Okay. Why do we have to spread across all the world all the 5G antennas and all this fucking hell electromagnetic pollution and that corrupts insects, the birds migration, our health, many things? Why don't we use other kind of aspects? So in this sense, I could say that sometimes there is not only a naive or an innocent not knowing, but okay, let's say that it could be. I don't think, but let's say that it could be. We could just say relate our gesture, our technical gesture, because today science is just techne, that is resolving problem and not only knowing. We want to resolving problem. Okay, refer our gesture within the logic of nature. And in this sense, I want to say a little note. How can we know nature outside of nature? We cannot. And this is maybe something that we have to rewrite, is exactly this idea of knowledge. Because our Brunella, you know, because I made a whole seminar on this, the tradition of science taught us that the objective knowledge from outside, the epistemological attitude, is something that delivers the truth. Completely wrong, because, for instance, coherence in water, for instance, just to make a stupid example, and integrating it into in many other levels, it translates into experience or perceptions, cannot be understood, cannot be known from inside. From outside, sorry. You need to be inside the system to experience the exact dynamic, to be aware of the coherence. From outside, you can only maybe have some clues. So this is the point, to shift completely from the Homo technicus perspective that wanted to grasp, objectify nature, objectify life, and handle it in a hybris that is completely suicide, passing from this to the indigenous feeling of nature, that know nature from inside, being part of that, and not believing that being inside something prevents you from understanding exactly this something. Because today we have the craziness of people that know anything of the genome of some bacteria and has not the ability of relate their gestuality to the intelligence of the web of life and create GMOs or hybridization of the rents of the uteri, or the artificial embryogenic of stuff. This is knowing nature. That's the provocation that I'm saying. No? Okay.
Just to reiterate what you're saying, Paolo, if you remember, it was in the 60s that we had the space exploration. And then
Alleged
they had a hiatus of like maybe 50, 60 years. Why now they're all of a sudden they're interested in building colonies on the moon? If not for mineral mining and the introduction of water and ice into the moon. And these are basically decided not just by a blind techne, but by capitalist kind of desiring machines.
The attitude is the same.
So just to reiterate what you're saying, it's happening in front of our eyes right now. There's a kind of almost like a goofy science fiction aspect to whatever Elon Musk is doing. You can already find it in a science fiction novel from the 50s. You know, it's like the man who stole the moon. Basically, they're stealing the moon now from us.
There are several hints that we have never been on the moon, in fact, but okay.
Okay. Anyway, we cannot say technologies we are saying exactly the opposite of what we said at the beginning. That is, that nature is on one side, technology on the other side. Nature must be respected. Technology is part of nature. It's not as bad as technology itself. All animal species have used the technologies. This is the usual basics of cybernetics. Depends on the aim, but what's the point of criticizing, analyzing, if we do not have the actual instruments to give technologies a different direction? This sounds like the 70s. In the 70s, we kept saying we must change the world, but the world has gone awry. So I think we need to have a different approach with the technologies, in the sense of trying to maybe appropriate them. This sounds naive, but not denying their values, because as bad as they can be, they're also good. We cannot make a sharp distinction. And nature is not the opposite of techne. Techne is Kant, sorry for the quote, Kant talked about the technique of nature. Nature without technique, it doesn't mean anything. But this doesn't mean that we must justify Musk or this, capitalistic way, this way of getting profit from any kind of useless innovation. This is not the point. The point is how to find the political force to change the direction. If we don't have a political force, becomes a kind of intellectual game to criticize and analyze, because the technologies have always been stronger than any kind of critique. They're always stronger because they are economic forces, economic not in the sense of capitalist, but economic in the sense that save energy. In this very moment, we are using technologies because this was an opportunity that we are given to communicate. So it's this kind of using the technology to criticize them. It's kind of an obsolete way to criticize.
I think, Brunella, what you're saying is that we can never assume that technologies are invented. They're in a way,
Sorry?
technologies are discovered by humans as opposed to invented.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we have the wrong idea when we assume that we invented the technology.
Okay, I understand. See, I agree with you. We are like we do with nature what nature can do. Okay, that is this nature that gives us the possibility to invent. Otherwise, this is called anthropocentrism.
Right.
We're not so special in this universe. This is why we can consider networks instead of systems, closed systems. Okay, so we are going Paolo disagrees. Paolo, one last word and then we
No, I think that the technology actually is very different from nature, because the difference between nature and technology is that when a wasp lay an egg in a worm or whatever, when you have that any biological system is developing some strategies, this is not engendered within the rational volunty and the attitude that objectify the reality. The technical gesture objectify the world. In fact, is the daughter, is the child of the objectifying thinking, the description, the language, the dichotomy of the subject and the object. In nature, any kind of process is not born in this kind of attitude. This fracture is only in the human being, for reason that I have, on which I have many thoughts, but I don't share here, because I think that we are not natural. We are the result of some manipulation that has been done. And we have many documents on this, genetical proofs, and also other aspects. But okay, I quit on this. But the fracture between nature and technology is exactly this one. The technical gesture is always objectification, is only to reach an aim that is exactly and only on the agent of the technology. In nature, a leopard evolves claws or jaws or whatever, or a certain of mantle with the same certain colors or whatever, because it's the web of life that is plasming, is forging this stuff. There is not the willingness of an animal to become able to make things or whatever. In the technology gesture, this is the point, and in fact, this is the terrible consequence that we have. So when men were still related to nature and the technology was declined in a very humble and contained range, it's still possible to be interfaced with nature, and we do not create disasters. Imagine Aborigines or the Native Americans or many other things. When technology overcomes certain thresholds, anything is fucked up, because nature cannot face this thing, and this gesture does not come from nature, comes from something else that is alien to nature. Is a gestuality that is no more commensurate, is no more feeling this depth of the nature. In fact, in this sense, I do not agree with Agamben in the sense that he thinks still that the body is a mere brutality, is a mere causality, quindi say una causalità in italiano. But I'm with the phenomenologist, with Merleau-Ponty. We have to think of the subject, not the Körperdinge, but the lib, the subject of the body is not an object, is a process. this is just to answer Brunella, the fact that
I
is
want to,
a network because it's a relational pattern in
I
time.
agree, absolutely agree. But if you quote from Merleau-Ponty, Agamben, they belong to 1 century ago. This is what I mean. We need something else. It's not enough. It failed. This attitude failed. Okay, I'm not saying that it's wrong. The attitude of saying nature is good, a technique is bad. This was typical of the phenomenologists, all the main philosophers in the 20th century. They failed. Let's face the situation. The technologies are stronger, and therefore we need another attitude. We need another attitude.
Yes, they failed. I think the last sentence that I say that because, as you are saying, the technology logos was so strong and so impactant and so seductive, like Heidegger also denounced it, like Gunther Anders and many others, that if we do not, with Adorno, create a Bildung of nature, a feeling of nature in the man will be always misled by technology.
I understand, but let's create this feeling of nature. I don't see any philosophy of that kind. Unless
sorry,
we go back to
I'm trying to do that.
May I add something to
and the feeling of nature is not the opposite of the technologies. There's no way that we can, because we are talking about through the technologies here in this very moment. We are using the technologies. We cannot say they're stronger. I use them, but they're wrong. It seems to be to release the humans from responsibility, as if you said, well, it's not a human responsibility. It is a human responsibility, but humans are weak. Humans are weak.
We have to stay in this dialectics between the nature and technology. We have to be able to dance in this very subtle crime of the dialectics. We use technology. I think that we should use it within the sensitivity of nature.
there is a kind of analogy to that in the relations between systems and networks, because the spider that I have in my balcony creates like a spider web that is affected by electromagnetism, pollution, and so on and forth. And even the formation of the spider is affected by it. So there is no distinction between the human and the non-human, or a termite nest is a technological fit for the organism, even though it's mostly somatic. But I guess there are also individual singular spiders and termites too. They're not exactly the same. So I think that the question that Brunella is pointing to is the question of scale and relation. In other words, because we were used to the Rinascimentale conception of like micro, macro, the human in between and all that. Now we have moved ourselves from the in between, the intermediate between the micro and the macro. We have to. We're no longer there. And therefore, the whole calibration of nature based on us in the middle has to be abandoned because it is false. The same way that to be in a Ptolemaic kind of life world view that the Earth is the center of the Earth and not the sun of the planetary system was probably more conducive in terms of well-behaving people and compassionate people than once it was the sun and not us. We can do whatever the fuck we want, right? You can say it created more nihilism or anarchism and so on. But we're at the point now that the scale has shifted from the human as an intermediate of the micro and the macro. And that's why we see the space exploration with the quantum computers and the AI unfolding at the same time, because they are annihilating the distinctions. They're no longer there to work with. You can be nostalgic or melancholy about it, but it's not going to change anything. We have to come to terms with what can we do, how to recalibrate it based as it happens, as it unfolds, on the new kind of objectives, not in the sense of subjects, but on the new objectives or constructs in the system, and how we can open it up to a network. That's how I look at it. That's why I found Leonardo's point actually inspiring, because if we look at networks, they're not limited to only one place and one time.
Yeah, Alessandro.
No, I mean, it's a huge conversation. It's a huge problem. I just wanted to add that even the notion of nature is problematic. It is a human invention. It is often associated with the idea that the environment is something that stays before our eyes or around us, and it led to these ontological misunderstandings, such as the opposition between nature and culture, which particularly for the human being is very problematic and perhaps a little bit superficial in a way, or at least we managed to question it also with some new philosophical tools this last decade. So this is also something we should think about, not only the problems of technology in terms of how they affect humanity or relation to the environment, but also what we mean by nature and how we can relate to it in contemporary societies. I think this is also a way of looking at the problem. The notion of nature sometimes, I mean, it's a very, very complex concept, and it's sometimes is a way of simplifying a set of very complex processes that are perhaps more entangled with, in the case of human beings, with cultural, technological processes than what we imagine at first. Also, nature has this sort of touristic overtone. You know, I take a walk in nature, or this is also a way of simplifying things. So I'm not going anywhere particular with this. I just wanted to point out that even the notion of nature should be addressed if we talk about this opposition, and we try to find a way to change, as Brunella was saying, our theoretical categories compared to what we had in the 20th century, and that still kind of influences the way in which we think today.
I fear we need a seminar on nature, Paolo. Okay, I would stop here because otherwise it takes a few more hours about this. Grazie tantissimo Adam, grazie Paolo, Bruno e Alessandro. Ci vediamo il 12 con Alessandro e non so quali sono i discussants. E Paolo, devo leggere i tuoi articoli e poi riprenderemo questo discorso.
Molto interessante, grazie a tutti.
Grazie a tutti. Ciao, ciao, ciao.